Sorry. What is it, Sudhita? Okay. Right. Mr. Mason has joined. So people possible keep your mic muted and keep your camera button, and then your questions will be answered.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Mr. Mason.
Hello, Mr. Mason.
Hello.
Mason.
Hi, guys. Good to see you all.
Hi, sir.
Hello.
Hi, sir. Hello, sir.
Hello. All right.
Hello, Mr. Mason. So yes, so nice to see you again. So thank you very much for joining today. We got a lot of new faces as well who are joined us today. Yes. So for those who aren't really familiar with Mr. Mason, so Mr. Mason is an undergraduate from the Stony Brook University, USA. So he's here to talk paleontology and how to become a paleontologist. So Mr. Mason, let's start.
All right. And how much time do I have?
You can talk as much as possible because I think we have time till 2 hours. Yeah.
2 hours. Okay. Wow. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and we're going to get ready. I hope you guys are all excited. Here we are. Going to turn off your sound. Awesome. All right. Can you guys all see that?
Yes, yes, yes.
Awesome. That's great.
Yes.
So I'm going to turn on the slideshow here and I'm going to make this a little smaller. All right. So we're going to start talking about fossils, right? Because you guys are here to learn about paleontology, right? And paleontology is the study of fossils. So, and I have this other big word here. It's kind of a scary word called taphonomy. And taphonomy is just how fossils form. So that's what we're going to be talking about first. So why is this important? Every time you guys get a PowerPoint in this series, we're going to talk about why it's important first, right? Because you guys want to know why you're learning this stuff. So paleontologists study fossils, right? And when we study how things become fossils, we learn about how they're going to be preserved, and we're going to learn about how that affects how we view the past. So first off, what is taphonomy? What is this big scary word? So more specifically, it's the study of everything which happens to an organism after it passes away, after it dies. So one of the most important rules of science is this: absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So if you guys are in school, you guys will probably learn, you'll probably hear this a lot as you get higher up in levels of science. Basically what this means is, imagine, back 2,000 years ago, people didn't know that stars were big burning balls of fire like you guys do, right? Because you guys are in astronomy class, right? But they still were, giant, big burning balls of fire. And the way that people didn't know that is because they didn't have any evidence. But just because they didn't have any evidence of that doesn't mean it wasn't true. So if we don't find evidence of something, that does not mean it's not there. So that's what that means. So yeah, it's kind of fun. So taphonomists the way they do their science is like this person is doing right here. They leave organisms out in different conditions. So they leave, like in this case, what looks to be a dead antelope. They've left out in the desert, and they look at what happens to it over time. As you can see, it's no longer in a skeleton, right? It's kind of broken up into little different pieces. Everything's moved around. You can see if predators come and try to eat it, scavengers, like vultures or something like that. And you can see if, mushrooms start growing on it or any other thing. And they carefully note this all down, because if it happened like this now, it probably happened like this in the past too. So we've learned a few different things from these studies. We've learned that dead things pretty much completely decompose. That means they completely rot away, they go away in only a few years unless they are under very special conditions. Even then, only teeth, which are basically rocks that your body makes, and bone, which are made of a hard crystal called apatite, are many times more likely to survive for long periods of time than anything else. So that means that the fossil record is biased. Biased means that something it's not quite, telling you the full truth. So like, maybe if you see one of your friends gets like accused of stealing something, right? And the only person that has that is the witness to that is their brother, right? That might be a little biased, right? Because their brother might, either maybe they like them a lot and they're not going to tell the truth because they don't want them to get caught, or maybe they really don't like them, so they're not going to tell the truth because they want to see them get punished, right? So that's what biased means. It means it's not telling us the full truth. So the fossil record is biased. When we look at fossils, they're biased because there are things with no hard parts are going to be underrepresented, and things which die in places which create fossils are overrepresented. So that means things like jellyfish, right? We're not going to find many fossils of jellyfish because they're very squishy. They're very squishy, so they don't preserve very well. But we're going to find a lot of things like shells, like bones, like teeth. And we're also going to find things in environments which preserve things better. And that includes places like mostly waterways, right? Things don't preserve well if if you just like leave something like on the street or on the on the ground, right? It's going to rot away. But if you drop something in a river, it's actually going to be a lot more likely to preserve, or in a pond or on the coast of the ocean. But things in the middle of the ocean, for reasons that you'll probably learn about later in the course, are not going to be preserved as well. So they're going to be underrepresented. And our view of the past is also distorted by inequality. Countries which make more money can afford to support paleontology more, can support the study of fossils more. So there's more people looking for fossils, and there's more people researching fossils. These also tend to be colonial countries, countries which have gone from where they live to other places to try to gain money there. And they've kind of extracted the fossils from those countries. Places like Europe and America have gone to other countries. Their scientists have gone to other countries, taken the fossils and brought them back home to their museums, which kind of is not super fair, for the countries that they've taken them from. And so this means that the United States and Europe and other places like that, what we call the Western world, has more paleontologists, or the global North, has more paleontologists and it has more better studied rocks than in other places in the world, like South America, Africa, and Southeast and South Asia. And you guys are in South Asia, in Sri Lanka. So this is one reason why it's really important for you guys to learn paleontology, right? Because your part of the story is really important, and we're losing a lot of that because there's not a lot of people studying it. So you guys are, an opportunity, a chance to learn more about a very important part of Earth's history, right? So you can kind of do away with this part of the bias. So how do fossils form? Because the reason, or how fossils form, is the reason for a lot of these biases in the fossil record. So it might seem obvious, but the first thing something has to do to become a fossil, the first step, is that it has to die. So this might seem obvious and all, but it actually leads to a very important bias, right? People who are in their prime, people, or animals or plants which are in their prime, are less likely to die. So we actually in the fossil record usually see more young creatures, and very young creatures, and very old creatures, right? Because they're more likely to pass away. So the things in the middle aren't going to be preserved at a high rate. So if we, can tell the age of the things we find, and we see that for some reason we're seeing a lot of animals in their prime, and they're at the middle of their life, we might just start to think, I wonder why it's that way, because that's different than the normal, which is more young and old animals. So we can, start to tell things about what caused these animals to die in this place. And this can also lead to some other problems. Like this is why we initially thought Neanderthals. Neanderthals are they're an ancient species of human that lived in Europe. We evolved in Africa, us humans, you and me. But Neanderthals evolved in Europe at around the same time, and they're extinct now. But we initially thought they were, if you think of like a caveman, right? They had hunchbacks, they had bad teeth, they were kind of, grunting creatures, like kind of lumbering around. That's what we thought. The only reason we thought that was because the first ones we found were old men. They were old people. So they had, arthritis. They had bad teeth because they'd been, very old. They lived long storied lives. So we have to kind of think about this bias when we're looking at fossils and make sure that we don't make a mistake because of it. Now, there are some exceptions here. Things like shark teeth, right? Shark teeth. Sharks have infinite teeth, so they shed them over time, right? There's a shark tooth right here. So shark teeth like this, they actually, when they bite something, it usually wears off the tip and they can spit out the tooth. And they have an infinite ones behind it that replace it. Now, because of that, that means that they're shed while the animal is living. And things that like this trilobite here, they have exoskeletons and they shed their skin. They shed their skin. So we can have ones that don't have this, a lot of young, a lot of old thing. Now, after something dies, it must be quickly buried. Usually, the quicker it's buried, the less decomposition, the less rotting is going to happen, and the less scavenging. So look, this poor little Triceratops has died right here, but it's being eaten by like Archaeopteryx or some sort of, small bird or small flying dinosaur. And that eating it, that's not going to be great for it, right? That's going to start moving the bones around. That thing's probably going to try to gnaw on the bones and everything, and it might take it back to its nest, so this is going to start to disassociate or disarticulate. That means take it out of its skeleton into individual bones, and it's going to start scattering the bones in larger and larger places. Now we are lucky with this Triceratops here because it happens to have died in a place where there's water. Water is very good for burying things quickly. So most of the time our fossils here aren't articulated because over time they get disassociated, they get moved, scattered. And even in water, there's fish and other things that are eating it that are going to do that. So in other words, they're usually spread out and jumbled. Now, quick burial often happens in water, fresh or salty. It can be either. So it can be the ocean, or it could be a lake or a river or anything like that. Now, caves are an exception. They preserve fossils very well because the environment in caves is very stable. Caves, holes in the ground, they don't change a lot over thousands and thousands of years because there's not many things that can live in a cave very successfully. And the things that do are pretty small, right? So this is where things can go different ways. Now the thing has been buried, right? But now they can turn into fossils or turn into rock in a few different ways. First, we have things called molds and casts. Now, this happens when the remains themselves over long periods of time kind of dissolve away or rot away. In this case, this is a seashell. Seashells actually dissolve in acidic water, so it's actually dissolved away. And because it's dissolved away, just the sediment, the dirt, and the sand that's filled in that shell after it died has stayed, and it's left an imprint of the seashell. So this is called the cast. It's the positive, right? It's the part that it comes off of the rock, what we call convex. This right here is concave, right? It actually goes into the fossil, right? It goes into the fossil, kind of like scoop shaped. And so this is like an imprint of it. So if you like press something onto clay, you've created a mold. But if you're making like a pot or a pan and you want to cast it out of iron, you have like a mold and you pour the iron in and it creates a cast, right? So sometimes you get both, like in this case. So this actually fits into this like that. But sometimes you only get one or the other. And particularly in shells, you don't need to remember this, but there's something called a Steinkern, and that's just a fancy little German word for when we have both sides of a shell cast and we don't have any mold. So the next one of the cooler ones, is called permineralization, which I know is a big scary word, but all it means is that water has basically soaked the fossil over many millions of years, and water actually has minerals dissolved in it. You might know if you put sugar in water or salt in water and stir it around, or even like tea in water, you know, a lot of it dissolves into it, right? Water can hold all this stuff, but when that water evaporates, when it goes away, you know, it leaves that stuff behind. So it's left behind a lot of crystals, right? A lot of crystally stuff. So in this case right here, it's called petrified wood, right? So that's a permineralized wood. So it's actually left something called silica in it and made it a very pretty color here. So fossils can actually be replaced. So this is, again, the actual organic material, the actual tree itself here is gone, but the rock remains, right? Because this minerals have coated it. In fact, in petrified wood, it's so good that it coats all the cells that if you slice it very thinly and put it under a microscope, you can see the cells, the individual cells of the tree. So this can lead to a dazzling variety of colors in fossils. The color of a fossil is largely determined, or it's because of the minerals in the water. So you can see this very pretty crab claw right here, which has been replaced with a special type of gemstone called opal. Opal. You see how shiny it is, right? They even have a whole, what's called a plesiosaur. You guys might have heard of that. It's a giant sea reptile with a long neck. They have one of those that's replaced by this, but it's not quite as pretty, so I put the crab claw instead. These are two shark teeth I found, and they were found not too terribly far from each other, but the water in one place was different than the water in the other. So we have one that's kind of white colored, one that's kind of black colored. And these are a type of tiger shark. So next is something that's really cool. It's called a Lagerstätten. Lagerstätten is a German word, and it just means a place that has preserved, or it's a fossil site, which has preserved things in a very epic, very cool way, right? And there's two types. There's Konzentrat Lagerstätten, and you might have heard the word concentrate, right? So that means there's a lot of fossils in one place. You see behind me here is a picture from the place I worked over the summer, the Mammoth Site. We have 60 mammoths in one hole, right? 60 mammoths at least. So that's called a Konzentrat Lagerstätten because there's a concentration. There's a lot of mammoths in one place, right? A lot of fossils in one place. But the cooler type is called Conservat Lagerstätten. And Conservat Lagerstätten is a place where fossils are preserved really good. That's why it's conserved, right? Conservat. So sites which preserve things in great detail, including soft tissue. And soft tissue is, you know, not bones, but like skin and flesh and all your organs and things like that. Maybe even your hair, right? Or your feathers, if you have feathers. So these are usually sites which have a lack of oxygen. Oxygen, you know, the stuff you breathe. Guess what? Bacteria breathes that too. And bacteria will eat all the soft tissue if it has oxygen. So if there's no oxygen, there's no bacteria, and that stuff can stay. Now, it's dangerous to assume that these sites are representative of their time period. That means that these sites are biased. They create bias because they overrepresent the creatures which live in that specific place. So, you know, maybe that in South Dakota here where all these mammoths were found, maybe there's not a ton of mammoths like everywhere, like around the area in the entirety of the United States. We only know that there was a lot of mammoths in this specific place where the sinkhole was, right? Or whichever site you're at, it only represents the area where it is. And also, you don't know what was making them fall in. We find a ton of mammoths, but not a single saber-toothed tiger. And you know why that is? It's because saber-toothed tigers, they can climb out of a sinkhole. Mammoths don't have hands, so they can't climb out of the sinkhole, right? So, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a second, some more cool Lagerstätten places, because they're really fun. So some fossils are preserved as something called a mineral film. A film just means something that's very thin, right? Just like in the old days when they made movies, they had to have it on film. So all living things are made of carbon. They're carbon-based. Carbon is like the stuff that's at the tip of your pencils, right? And it's also diamonds are made of carbon, and you are made of carbon. So when things are buried quick in environments which lack oxygen, remember, they don't have that bacteria, the carbon will stay there. And this most often happens when things are easily squished. So things that are soft, they get squished between the sediment, right? The dirt, and the dirt presses down on it, right, and squishes it. And that leaves the carbon there. So you can see this B here. It's preserved, you know, in 2D. And it's preserved it very pretty, right? You can see even the little veins on the wings of the bee, or you can see these plants, these ferns here from France. And they've been preserved. They've been squished between the sediment and left the carbon there. But it's not only carbon, it's all sorts of minerals that are important in your body. Things like phosphate, that's what this shark with a head ornament here is preserved in, something called phosphate. This is a pretty cool type of shark called Falcatus. And that's from the United States. And over here, and phosphate, by the way, is preserved, is in your DNA. It's so that stuff that makes you who you are, you know. And it's also got, it's also in the membranes of your cells. So the things which keep your cells as nice little bubbles, that's made of phosphate, which is what this is preserved in. Over here is a trilobite who even has all of his little legs and his antenna preserved. So that's what they would have looked like when they were alive. And that's been preserved in pyrite, which is an iron. So iron is found in your body in a lot of places, including your blood and things like that. So it's preserved in pyrite. Now, there's some other things that aren't quite how we think of fossils, right? Anything older than 10,000 years, any remains of past life older than 10,000 years is considered a fossil. So it doesn't need to be replaced by rock necessarily. So we have things here called finds from the permafrost. Perma, like permanent, like always there. Frost meaning cold. So the permafrost is places where it's always cold. So this is a layer underground in around the Arctic, where things are always cold. So animals got buried in this and they were frozen. They were frozen and they remained the same for many, many thousands of years. So this right here is a wolf cub who's been preserved in the permafrost. You can see he's still got all of his hair, his little claws, his teeth, his gums. He looks basically exactly how he would have looked when he died, even though he's thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. Right here is something called a steppe bison. So it's a type of, kind of like a large cow that used to live in the north. And he's been preserved with all of his skin and his horns and hooves. And these are all things which wouldn't normally survive if they had died in any other place. Now, another cool thing is called amber. Amber is fossilized tree sap. Tree sap, basically the tree sap is from some types of trees. It's very sticky. It forms big globes and things get stuck in it. And over time, the sap basically turns to plastic. And although the actual animal usually rots away, it actually preserves a 3D carbon film. So just like we had that film, that thin film, it's actually a thin film around, but all of these things are hollow, right? There's nothing inside of this, but it's still got the surface of it. So it's kind of like taking like a 3D scan of an ancient creature. So this basically preserves only small creatures. So you got to realize that's a bias, right? So we mostly get bugs and things like that, like this weird looking spider or arachnid thing that has a long tail. And then, but sometimes, we get lucky and we get something a little larger. This is actually the tail from a baby dinosaur. This is the tail of a baby dinosaur, and these are the feathers coming off of it, right? So this has been preserved in amber. This comes from Myanmar, or also known as Burma, over in Southeast Asia. And I think this one actually also comes from there. So I have a little video here. I wasn't sure if I was going to be teaching this class or not, or if Mr. Severe was going to be teaching it. So right here is a little video that I made for you guys about some of the cool Lagerstätten places. So if you want to see some Lagerstätten, you guys can, if you want, and I'll probably say this in the video, if you want to take a break, because I know I'm talking a lot and you just want to like stretch and sit up, you can do that. Or if you want to listen, then you're welcome to. So I'm going to start it. Hey kids, it's me, it's Mason. I'm back. You guys are learning about fossils, and so I thought it would be only correct to show you guys some really cool fossils from around the world, from places that are called Lagerstätten, in a singular. One place is called a Lagerstadt, and these are just places with incredibly well-preserved fossils. If you want, you can use this time to take a break and stretch out, but I think you guys will find this stuff cool. If you want to stick around, it's up to you. So first, I'm going to start with this guy up here. This is from the Tanis site. It's about 65 million years old, and that date might ring a bell in your head if you saw my thing about the Chicxulub impact event, because 65 million years ago is when the meteor hit in Mexico and killed all the non-bird dinosaurs. And this leg is actually from, it might be from the impact itself, or it's from very close to it at least. It's from Thessalosaurus, a small herbivorous dinosaur. You can see it's got 3 toes here. It's still got scales on it. Unfortunately, it's just the leg. The rest of the dinosaur got ripped off. There's lots of cool stuff coming from this Tanis site. I didn't include more of it because it's very new and there's not many pictures of it yet, but hopefully that'll be coming. So the first site we're going to start out with, we're going to go in time order. So we're going to start with the oldest. We're going to start with Burgess Shale. Burgess Shale is from British Columbia in Canada. So it's Western Canada along the mountains there. I believe it's the Rocky Mountains. You can see it's very high up, very secluded, very hard to reach. But in these shales, which they split, you can see they're black. These black shales, which are, you know, it's a deep environment here, or it's a shallow environment actually, but it's under the ocean, and it's very anoxic. There's not much oxygen, and that's what's preserving these creatures so beautifully and preserving soft bits. And as you guys know from listening to this, soft bits are really rare in the fossil record, so it's very cool. We can get a picture of the environment. It looks somewhat like this. Lots of different types of trilobites. Which are, of course, extinct today. They look kind of like roly-polies, but they're not related to them. If you guys have roly-polies there, I'm sure you do. We have our early ancestors here, our early ancestors, chordates like this. I believe it's Pykea. And we have Anomalocaris, an apex predator. It's an arthropod as well. It's got an exoskeleton, just like the trilobites, except we think it probably ate trilobites with its scary long proboscis, or maybe some soft things like this poor little worm here. We've got weird stuff like hallucinogenia, which we just don't know what it's related to. Spiky guy in the back here called Woaxia, probably an arthropod as well. And also jellyfish, which are, of course, you know, jelly, so we think that they shouldn't preserve, but they do here. Here are some examples of the fossils that are found there. There's that early ancestor I was talking about, that Pykea. How do we know that it's an early ancestor? We know because it has a spinal cord. This is before the spinal column, before the bones, your backbone, but it's still got the cord itself. So we know that it's somewhat related to us. We also have regular worms here, just like we see today in the ocean. Here is that spiky thing I showed you in the back, the Woaxia. Here's that Anomalocaris, the apex predator. It's about 1 meter long. You can see these, it's got some beautiful compound eyes, just like bugs do today. It's got these really scary front appendages for grabbing stuff. Here's the hallucinogenia that we don't really know what it's related to. It's kind of weird. It's got a head and it's got spikes. At first we thought it was an arm of something because it was so weird, but it's only found by itself. And it's got a clear head, so we think it's its own thing. And then here's one of the beautiful trilobites that are found in the Burgess Shale. Moving on to the Maizon Creek, 309 million years ago. I promise I didn't just pick it because it sounds close to my name. It's a very cool site from a kind of a swampy delta. So it's like where the rivers meet the ocean, you know, it kind of spreads out and it forms this kind of swamp. And it's from 309 million years ago during the Carboniferous period. Carbon, you know what carbon is, it's black stuff like in coal. This is when a lot of the coal comes from because the whole world was covered in rainforests. Now, basically what happens here is they were building a highway and they had to move a lot of dirt and they put it all in one place. And it turns out that in this dirt are these round concretions. They're a type of round rock. Basically, a glacier has picked up all of the sediment that used to be there and turned it into these little balls instead. So they're what people go and find. They sift out the little circles, the concretions, they split them open, and there's fossils inside. And this is kind of what the environment would have looked like. There was a lot more oxygen around that time, which is why there was, or it was being produced by that rainforest. We had millipedes that were many meters long. We had dragonflies with meter-long wingspans as well. And here are some of the fossils. Now, because it was a delta, we find both land creatures and water creatures. One of the most common things are ferns like this, which is very common from this time period everywhere. But what's not common everywhere is, of course, these little beautiful insects, or this is not an insect, this is an arachnid. This is a scorpion. You can see it's got a pincer here, and a stinger at the back. If you look up scorpion today, they look just like this. I don't know if you guys have scorpions in Sri Lanka. We don't have them where I live. Then there are this is a beautiful, intricate shark egg. And what type of shark? Probably this one. And this is just a baby. We know they actually got pretty big, but this is just a few inches long. They probably got up to like around 1 meter. They have this long rostrum, this long nose coming off. And you can see these beautifully preserved eyeballs from this little baby shark that got preserved. We also find jellyfish is actually one of the most common fossils there, aside from ferns. You can see the top of the jellyfish and then the tentacles coming down. Usually it's just the top and you don't get the tentacles, but it's cool that we're seeing jellyfish, right? Because usually jellyfish just decay away really quickly, but in this environment they didn't. We have this Eoproops, it kind of looks like horseshoe crab, and a trilobite, but I don't think it's very closely related to either. I think it is a crustacean though. And then we have the most famous, so the Maizon Creek is in a state called Illinois, and Illinois has decided this is their mascot, this is their official fossil of the state of Illinois, and it's called the Tully monster, or more scientifically, Tully monstrum, which translates to Tully monster. And we're not quite sure what it's related to. If you look very closely, you can see it might have a spinal cord here, so it might be a early offshoot of our evolution. But it's a very strange looking creature. It's got this big flat tail, this bulbous body, and this weird long proboscis that ends with this scary looking jaw, and its eyes come out on antenna. It's just a very strange looking creature. You guys love dinosaurs. I love dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are just cool, right? So I'm going to show you the Yixian Formation, about 125 million years old in China. You can see it's the shales which they split. It's a lake that was periodically covered with ash from volcanoes, which kind of covered everything that was in it and preserved it in beautiful detail. And there was a relative to T-Rex there, Yixian Tyrannus. I'm not going to show you any Yixian Tyrannus fossils because unfortunately they don't have some of the great detail that we have on these guys. But on these guys we have feathers, and this was very important because we weren't sure what we all thought that dinosaurs had scales like this guy did, but apparently not all of them do. Some of them, especially the ones that are more closely related to birds, have beautiful feathers. And actually we now know that a lot of them had feathers, not just the ones that are closely related to birds. We even have this large fossil which has these beautiful tail plumes going on and hand flumes as well. This is called, I'm blanking on the name. It's an Oviraptorosaur. I think it's Caudopteryx. Yeah, caud meaning tail, pteryx meaning wing. So you see tail wing. That's kind of what they're going for here. It's an oviraptorid or oviraptoid, related to these kind of ostrich-looking dinosaurs, which had these big beaks. Originally, we thought that they it's called oviraptor, meaning egg thief, because we thought that it was stealing eggs because the first one we found was on top of an egg case. We found out later that those were actually its eggs, so they aren't stealing eggs. They're just really good moms. We also have in the Yixian Formation hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of birds. Birds lived alongside dinosaurs, and you can see it's got these beautiful feathers, these beautiful plumage on it, along with soft tissue. It's called Confuciornis, and it's different from today's birds because it has teeth, which is kind of scary to me. I don't know about you guys. Okay, this is our last one. We're going to be talking about the Green River Formation. We're back in the United States in the state of Wyoming. And you can see it's another place where we've had a volcanic ash and a lake with an anoxic layer at the bottom with no oxygen, where things are preserved very well because there's no bacteria growing and they were quickly buried. And it comes in these nice shale, which is easy to split. Some of this formation is in a national park, so no one can, other than paleontologists, can be splitting shale. So it's preserved for future generations. Other places that are on private property, you can go, and if you pay a certain amount of money, they'll let you find fossils there. And a lot of these are sold on the market for fairly cheap. And what did it look like? Well, it was a lake, obviously, I said. It's got some cool, this garfish, which is a scary fish we find in the United States. It's got little crustaceans. obviously fish, stingrays, which is kind of cool, freshwater stingrays, the early relatives of horses, and also crocodiles and snakes and turtles, other reptiles. So these are kind of what the fossils look like. There's the early relative of the horse, the dawn horse, or Eohippus. We've got a large, this isn't actually a gar, this is a paddlefish. They've got this big rostrum, just kind of like that shark I showed you earlier, though they're not related. Paddlefish are still alive today in the US. They also used to live in China, but unfortunately they've recently went extinct. Here's one of those beautiful, beautiful crocodiles, just preserved really nicely. Sometimes we get like gut contents, which is really cool. Bats, which we almost never find in the fossil record other than maybe their teeth, because as you can see, their bones are really tiny and delicate and light so that they can fly. We also have some beautiful like palm fronds. Really rich people sometimes will like put these up in their houses on the wall and things. Here's a stingray, one of those stingrays, Heliobatus. I believe it means sun ray, because it kind of looks like a sun, right? And the most common things are these fish. They find tens and tens of thousands of these fish, mostly of the species Nischia. I think this one might be Diplomystis or a different one whose name I cannot remember right now. But fish are very common, and they have this beautiful soft tissue preservation. You can see the scales that were on the fish when it was alive. It's as if it died yesterday. So I hope you guys enjoyed learning about these really cool fossil sites. There are hundreds more that have just as cool stuff going on. This soft tissue preservation, maybe not hundreds, but a lot. There's definitely hundreds of fossil sites. There's definitely dozens of other Lagerstätten sites. Yeah, all right. So that's the Lagerstätten. Let's see if I can get rid of the whole screen there. All right. So I see someone raise their hand. So we're going to be done with this little portion here very quickly. After that, I'll take questions, and then we'll move on to the next section, because we're actually doing 2 today, just to get through on time. So subfossils here. Subfossils are, but keep that question, by the way, and you can write it in the chat if you want to, if you can type it up in the chat. So subfossils. Subfossils are fossils that are not actually quite fossils. They're younger than 10,000 years old, but there still remains a past life, right? So like this here is a mummified. So it's basically, it's dried out, just like the mummies from Egypt, right? This is a mummified Moa Foot. Moa is a giant bird that's extinct now. And here's what its foot looked like. You know, there's all the skin, there's all the muscles, and there's the claws, right? So it's exactly what it looked like. So these are still important for our understanding of past life, and specifically like how these animals interacted with humans, right? Humans have only, gotten to some places 10,000 years ago. So it's kind of cool to see how populations interact with animals. So many of these are buried bones or remains in caves, and places that preserve things for long amounts of time. Places that mummify things are always very good, right? And again, sometimes they're associated with human activity. There's also places called tar pits. You guys may have heard of the La Brea tar pits. So naturally occurring tar pits are places that spew black, sticky goo called tar or asphalt or bitumen or pitch. There's lots of different names for it. Macadam, right? But it's the same stuff they make roads out of, right? That black stuff they make roads out of sometimes. When an animal gets stuck and dies in it, often other animals will smell it and try to scavenge them. And this creates a trap, right? A trap for predators. So that means that, like, let's say a mammoth gets stuck in it, right? Then a bunch of saber-toothed tigers, they smell that and they think that's pretty good. So they try to get it, but then they get stuck. And then now there's twice the smell of meat, and now more predators are going to come and try to get it. And then they're all going to get trapped too. So these are called predator traps, and they create a big bias, right? It doesn't mean that there were like many, many more predators than prey. There weren't like thousands and thousands and thousands of more saber-toothed tigers than mammoths. It just means that those were the ones that got stuck there, right? So they preserve fossils really nicely. So if you're willing to scrape off the foul-smelling tar for hours on end, you get some really cool fossils. And so this is a picture from the La Brea tar pits. That's what tar looks like. And right here are thousands, the most common mammal there, thousands of direwolves. Direwolves aren't just a thing that's, kind of, you may have heard of it like as a fictional creature, as like a myth, right? But direwolves were real. They're a giant type of wolf that used to live in the United States and the rest of North America. And there are thousands of them here. They're the most common animal because they were trying to scavenge those things. Now, trace fossils, also known as ichnofossils, are evidence of past life that isn't remains. So it isn't part of their body, right? It's either, their footprints, right? Or handprints or wing prints or things from them moving or their burrows, or it could be things, like their feces, their poop, right? So right here is a cave that's full of giant sloth poop. Giant sloths are an extinct animal, right? You may have heard of sloths, they're kind of slow things that kind of go through trees. But back then, they used to live on the ground and they were giant, right? And so sometimes they went into caves and they left their droppings and it got full and full of this stuff. Unfortunately, that creates a lot of methane. Methane is a combustible gas, which actually can come from feces. And so someone accidentally lit a cigarette there once and it actually blew up the cave. So this cave is no longer around. But there's other types of trace fossils like this. This is actually a burrow from a type of groundhog, or I mean a beaver, sorry, a beaver. I don't think you guys have beavers, but they're mammals that are like this big. They got big buck teeth, big teeth like this, and they like to chew through trees, or at least modern ones chew through trees, and they're giant rodents. They chew through trees and they make big dams that clog our rivers and make us unhappy. But this is one of their burrows that is preserved as a fossil. So as I said, footprints are also trace fossils. This is a ancient ancestor of humans and Neanderthals and all other things. It would have had a brain that's the size of a chimpanzee's, but it would have walked on 2 legs. And this is actually a parent, presumably a mother based on its gait, and right here, a child walking alongside it. And they were walking through soft, newly fallen volcanic ash. Right here, you guys like dinosaurs. I like dinosaurs. Who doesn't? And this is a dinosaur trackway from a giant long-necked dinosaur, a sauropod. And because of geologic forces, which you'll learn later about in the course, it's actually turned it like that. But this was flat when the dinosaur walked across it. And that's from Bolivia, South America, and this is from Tanzania in Africa. So what about the main fossil sites of Sri Lanka? You guys are from Sri Lanka, you want to know about that stuff. And if you saw my other thing that I gave for the Knox Salon Institute, you probably saw the same things. But just as a refresher, in northern and possibly a little pocket in southeastern Sri Lanka, limestone dates back to about 14 million years ago, a time called the Miocene epoch, a time when I found a lot of my fossils, right? So the fossils that are found there so far include whale, dugong. Dugong is a sea cow. They're not actually related to cows, they're just called sea cows. Sharks, turtles, fish, and many seashells, right? Many seashells. It was best explored by the father of Sri Lankan paleontology, P.E.P. Daranyagala, and he described a lot of the stuff. He drew this picture right here, and there's more to be found. It hasn't been explored an incredible amount. There's probably even things that I found at the same time period in North America. Megalodon teeth. Megalodon, the largest shark to ever live. More scientifically, Carcaricles megalodon. Now, in the Tabawa beds, which are kind of in central Sri Lanka, or central western Sri Lanka, are a place where there's fossils from the Jurassic period. You may have heard Jurassic Park, right? So these are from the time of the dinosaurs. So there's not many places where you can find them, but they have yielded plant fossils, plants like this, and insect traces. You can see these little insect eggs and things that have been left on these plants. There hasn't been any dinosaurs found there yet, but maybe you guys will be the first to find it. Who knows? They've also now found that below those dinosaur-bearing rocks are older rocks that are from the Permian, the time period right before dinosaurs. And from there, they have also found lots of plants, but maybe someday they'll find some cool animals. There were some really cool animals during that time. In North America, we have things called like Dimetrodon, right? I don't think we'll have those in Asia, but we'll have some other really cool things to see there, right? And last but not least, the Ice Age, the Pleistocene, right? So most of the research in Sri Lanka about the Ice Age has been focusing on what humans did to interact with them. But most of these have been found in the southern half in caves and rock shelters. There's probably more to find, but there's tigers, bulls, rhinos. You guys had lots of elephants, crocodiles, lots of really cool stuff, and occasionally ancient humans. So, there's a lot of cool stuff to be found in Sri Lanka, a lot of more stuff that could be found in the future and can help tell about the story of our planet. So that's the first one done. We still have another one to go. But before I do that, I'm going to stop sharing just for a moment so we can see if there's any questions real quick. Yoran Ayusha, would you like to?
Guys, you all can ask your questions if you all have it.
Yeah, we're going to ask questions for 10 minutes, something like that. Yeah, you can go the person with the raised hand. You can either unmute or you can type your answer.
Excuse me, Mr. Mason. Can a dinosaur body be in a perfect shape if it would be in a carbon date?
Yeah, so if it's in a carbon film, right? So if you saw during the video from the Yixian Formation, right, from China, that was a carbon film, right? So that was a carbon film of a dinosaur, and there's actually lots of them there, right? And there's other places throughout the world where these have also been found. They're very rare, but sometimes we find a site that does preserve them in these carbon films, right? And it's usually places where there's been like volcanoes near lakes, and that's where they found them. We also occasionally, we've only found one, right? But sometimes we find them in amber. And when we find them in amber, that is a 3D carbon film, right? Yeah. Any other questions about what we just talked about?
Guys, if you all have any questions, please unmute yourself. Mark Demet, yes.
Mr. Mason,
Mhm.
in the past, do dinosaurs have brains so they can know to be safe? Do they have brains?
Yes, dinosaurs do have brains. They do have brains, and there's a very big difference in sizes between the brains of many dinosaurs, right? Birds today are actually dinosaurs. They're the descendants of the dinosaurs, and a lot of them are very, very smart. You may have heard like parrots that can actually speak. They can repeat human words. But some dinosaurs didn't have very big brains. And whether or not you have a big brain, right? Sometimes you get into trouble. Sometimes you make mistakes, right? Even humans, we get lost. We, make bad decisions. So, dinosaurs were no different. So sometimes they made, bad decisions like falling in a sinkhole. But yeah, some of them were very smart. Try things like Velociraptor, right? Like the raptor dinosaurs, or what we call dromaeosaurs, were rather smart. But other things like Stegosaurus, their brains were the size of a walnut, so about that big. So they weren't very smart at all. So some of them were very smart, some not so much. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah.
So what then when the asteroid come and break the dinosaur, the Spartans, why didn't they find shelter there?
Yeah, so the problem with the meteor hitting, with the asteroid hitting, that killed all these dinosaurs was not so much the initial time that it hit. And first of all, they didn't know what an asteroid was. Even humans didn't really understand what asteroids were until we could go into space and look at them, right? They'd come and they'd hit us, and we'd be very surprised. We'd see light coming across the sky, and we'd just be kind of scared. But the problem was not necessarily when it hit. The problem was that it basically it changed the climate. It made the weather very cold all around the world, and it made it so that a lot of plants didn't live. And plants form what's called the base of the food chain. So if there was a lot of plants that were gone, there was nothing for all the plant-eating dinosaurs to eat. and there's nothing for the plant-eating dinosaurs to eat, then all the plant-eating dinosaurs went extinct. And then if all the plant-eating dinosaurs are gone, there's nothing for the meat-eating dinosaurs to eat. So it basically, it took out the food chain, and that was over years and years and years. There's really no way they could avoid that. And they didn't have things like fertilizer or like farming like we do. So they were very vulnerable to this. So that's why they weren't able to hide and outsmart the extinction, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Excuse me,
Anytime.
Mr. Mason.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a species called Opabenia who were found in Canada. Is the species real?
It is 100% real. It definitely is real. Yeah, Opabena is very real, and it's a little smaller than Anomalocaris. It would have been really about this big, but it's really cool, right? It's got that long proboscis. It's really cool. I think it's really cool. And yeah, it's 100% real, and we found many examples of it. So, and I think we've even found some in other places in the world, even like Australia. So, yeah, that's very real. Very good job.
Actually, I also had to ask like that question. Is Hycleosaurus real?
It is what real?
Actually, I don't know how to pronounce it very well, but I will pronounce it as my best. Hycleosaurus.
Could you type it? Could you type it? Dunkleosteus, was that it?
No, Hycleosaurus. It starts with
Hycleosaurus.
H. Like
Yeah, I'm not.
Sudhita, can you type that on the chat box if you don't mind?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what it is, but it probably is real. There's a lot of cool things that have lived in the past. Yeah, if you can type it out, and then we'll be able to see. I can take one more question before we go on to the next section.
Excuse me,
right.
Mr. Mason.
Mm-hmm.
Were the fossils of mammoth found in any country?
Yes, mammoths have been found in a lot of places. You can see there's some mammoths behind me, right? I just came back to New York, but I spent the summer in a place where there were 60 mammoths in a pit. So there was lots of mammoths. I actually have a mammoth bone with me right now. This is a mammoth tooth. See the grind grass on the top of it, right? So this is what a mammoth tooth looks like. It's got a lot of layers. If you guys have ever seen an elephant tooth, it's very similar. Turns out that Asian elephants are actually very closely related to mammoths. They're more closely related to mammoths than they are to African elephants. So there's actually mammoth fossils all across Europe, Asia, and then into North America. And we have some in South America, and we also have, they actually evolved in Africa. So they've been found in almost every continent. Yeah, so they're really cool. Yeah, mammoth fossils have been found all over the place. Just about a month ago, they found a mummified baby mammoth in Canada. And they found other ones in Siberia. So yeah, there's a lot of mammoth fossils.
Sir,
All right.
can I ask a question, another question?
Yeah.
What was the first living organism?
First living organism. That's a great question. So at some point, we're going to talk in the course that we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But the first living organism was a cell, was probably a type of molecule, just a molecule that could replicate itself, right? A piece of DNA that accidentally got stuck in a membrane, right? A membrane, and that created the first cell, right? So they were things like bacteria. Bacteria, which could divide and then just divide. And they're very simple organisms, but they're able to, reproduce and metabolize. That means create energy for themselves. And yeah, so that's where it all started. And over time they evolved, and we're going to talk about evolution, and that's going to create new organisms. All right. So interested.
When was the first water living organism?
Yeah, so they probably evolved in water. So they were probably the first water living organism was bacteria. Yeah. So I'm going to move on now to the next one.
In the first dinosaur?
The first dinosaur? So, so the first dinosaur, we're actually going to talk about something kind of close to that, but we haven't found probably the first dinosaur yet. It was probably something that can walk on two legs. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to share my screen again. Yeah. If we're good on time.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. All right. Actually, let me stop share for a second. Share screen, share sound. Okay. So next, what is paleontology? What is paleontology? So you guys just learned about what fossils are, but what about the study of fossils, right? So paleontology is the study of fossils. And this is important because this is what you came here for, right? And so students can think of so you guys who think dinosaurs are cool, right? But now you're not just going to think dinosaurs are cool. You're going to be able to tell what those dinosaurs tell you. You're going to become seasoned deep time detectives. So humans have been looking for fossils since there have been humans to look for fossils. Here in where I live in North America, the native people here have taken fossil seashells and carved them into birds. They've taken shark teeth and made them into arrowheads. This is, something that every culture throughout the world has done. Right here, we have a pre-human species called Homo erectus, or maybe an early Neanderthal, has created this stone tool. Right before we had other things made out of tools like metal and things, we made them out of stone. So they've created a hand axe, and they've have this nice little fossil seashell in the middle for decoration. Right here is the Pyramids of Giza. You've probably seen them, right, in Egypt. And they're actually full of fossils. And the people would have seen them and known they were fossils and thought it was pretty cool. They didn't really know what they were, but they knew that they were, they looked like things that were alive today. But these people weren't exactly paleontologists because they weren't using this past life in order to answer questions, right? This is what paleontology does. We use this past life to answer questions. We're detectives, right? So they were mostly collecting them because they were pretty, right? Which is 100% valid. I think they're pretty as well. So there were a few people throughout the world who kind of became the first paleontologists. The ancient Greek philosophers used these guys to figure out that in some places where there was dry land, there used to be water. So they'd find fossil seashells on land. So logically, that must mean that at some point there was water where it is. During the Middle Ages, Chinese scientist Shen Kao used petrified bamboo to show that the climate had changed over time. He was like, well, here's bamboo that's fossilized in one place where there's no bamboo today. And he knew that bamboo only grew in certain types of places with certain weather. So he could say that at some point in the past that the weather was different and that there were places where bamboo could grow here. Few fossils had been collected in one place, though, to make a larger study of past life until the early 1800s. And that's in large part due to this woman right here. Her name is Mary Anning. Mary Anning grew up poor, and she helped support herself and her family by finding fossils along the coast of England to sell to rich people, England and Europe, right? So most of the things she was finding is right here, a coiled seashell called an ammonite. And they used to hold squid-like creatures. Now, at the time, they didn't know they used to hold squids. At the time, they thought they were petrified snakes, right? Snakes that had coiled up and the head was gone. Sometimes people would carve heads into them to sell. As far as we know, Mary Anning didn't do that, though. At only 12 years old, Anning found her first skeleton. She found her first skeleton. So she found an ichthyosaur. Ichthyosaur means fish lizard, right? Because it actually looks like a dolphin, but it's actually a reptile, right? They're not dinosaurs, but they are a reptile. So she would go on to find dozens and dozens of marine reptile fossils, not just ichthyosaurs. She'd find plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, all sorts of cool stuff. She was a really incredible fossil hunter. And she wrote in great detail about what these fossils represented. And many of her ideas were published by rich gentlemen scientists who bought her fossils. So unfortunately, she didn't really get the credit, mostly because she was a woman. And at the time in Europe, women weren't really allowed to participate in the scientific process. But many of the things that she thought about were actually 100% right, and that she got them right the first time. So she is a very important figure in paleontology. Her fossils still adorn many museums around the world. She sold these to people in all across Europe. People would come to her shop to buy it. Now, Anning's finds turned paleontology from a pastime into a science because now we had a lot of what is called data, right? We had a lot of fossils from one place that we could use to learn things about that time. So we could think about these fossils were from the Jurassic period, like Jurassic Park, right? So they kind of painted a picture of what it looked like. And by the way, here's a plesiosaur that Mary Anning found. Now, this is what they thought the world looked like. They weren't exactly 100% right, but they did a pretty good job with what they had, right? They thought there was, these large sea lizards. You can see Mary Anning and others at the time kind of figured out that these weren't exactly snakes. These were shells because they didn't have bones. And they weren't exactly sure what they were. You can see they have weird wing things here. I'm not quite entirely sure what they were thinking. But crocodiles, turtles, squids. There's things there called belemnites, which had originally been called thunderstones because people thought they shot like bullets into the ground when thunder struck, but they figured out the pen of a squid pen. Squids still have pens inside of them today. Just kind of like a little cone. And pterosaurs, which are close relatives of dinosaurs, but not dinosaurs, flying creatures, and fish. So this is the picture they painted of the world. Not long after, the first dinosaurs ever to be found were found by the same people who had bought Mary Anning's fossils, and they went and found their own, and in different places throughout England. The first three named ones were Iguanodon, which means, lizard tooth or iguana tooth. This is what Iguanodon looks like, or what we know it to look like today. And then Hylaeosaurus and Megalosaurus. This is Hylaeosaurus. It's a type of ankylosaur, right? And then, or a type of nodosaur, I think, actually. And then Megalosaurus, which is a type of theropod, a meat-eating dinosaur, right? So the blue stuff is the stuff that they had found originally. Now, unfortunately, they thought that some people were like, these have some very bird-like qualities to them in their pelvis particularly, but they thought that was coincidence, that had evolved what we say convergently. That means that, although they didn't really know about evolution, they thought that things had arisen in the same way, that just as like coincidence. But so they constructed their things as lizards, as reptiles. So this is what they thought they looked like. They didn't quite understand the whole limb thing, so they made them all quadrupedal, all on four legs. They thought these giant lumbering lizards, basically, that they had found. So they weren't exactly right, but that's okay. Sometimes we get things wrong, right? We're trying to basically look, we are trying to build up, to new types of fossils, or we're trying to build up to new ways of understanding fossils. So over time, we find more fossils, we come up with new ways of reading the rocks they are in. Nowadays, we have hundreds of different techniques that they didn't have then. They kind of developed them over time. It's something that we have to build on the past generation of scientists and get better and better at reading these fossils. And so it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to accidentally construct things like this and then find out they look completely different. That's okay. That's how we learn. Paleontology covers all past life, which is a lot of different creatures. There's a lot of things to look into. So paleontology has actually split into things called subdisciplines, people who study specific parts of paleontology. So I have another video here for you to watch, which is going to talk a little bit about those and the people who do it. Hey kids, so you guys have just been learning about what paleontology is, and as you just saw probably in the last slide, paleontology covers all of past life. So in order for people to kind of learn, become experts in their specific subjects, we've come up with these things called subdisciplines, and that's how we divide the study of all of the past life into manageable bits, so each person can become an expert in each one. And sometimes people change what they study over the course of their career. So if you want to become one type, that's okay. You can become that type. And then if you change your mind, you can still learn another subdiscipline. And each subdiscipline is incredibly important. So no one is better than any other. So let's get started. All right, so I'm going to show you some friends of mine in each of these subdisciplines to tell you a little bit about them, give you a little example. So this is my friend Cam. Say hi to Cam. He studies some of the oldest complex life on Earth. The fossils he's finding in Georgia, which is in the southeast of America, is over 500 million years old. So he's an invertebrate paleontologist. He studies animals which don't have spines. They don't have backbones. So if you take your hand and you bend your back and you run your hand over it, or if you you ever see someone like without their shirt on and you can see their back, you'll see there's like these little bumps on the back. That's your backbone, your spine. And these are that's animals which don't have them, are what he studies. Now, invertebrate paleontologists are extremely important because they tell you, because there's a lot of invertebrates. There's lots of different seashells, there's lots of different sponges, there's lots of different algae, there's lots of different just things that don't have backbones, and they preserve very, very well, or a lot of them preserve very well because they have hard exoskeletons. And so they can give you a lot of data on how environments change over time. They can also be, if you remember biostratigraphy or index fossils, they can, from one of the earlier presentations, you'll know that invertebrates are very important for using at different sites as index fossils to see how old they are and correlating them. And they're also very important for understanding paleoecology. Now, regular ecology is studying how animals interact in their ecosystem, animals and plants and other living things. Paleoecology is just doing that with fossils. So you're trying to see how different things interact with each other. So you can kind of paint a picture of what the environment used to look like. Now, here's a picture an artist drew of Cam with some of his preferred organisms, the things he studies. He studies these things called Anomalocaris, which was the apex predator 500 million years ago. They were a few feet long and they like to eat trilobites and things. Here's some trilobites, which Cam loves. And there's these crinoids or sea lilies and brachiopods, which are a type of seashell. These are some of the examples of some stuff you can study as an invertebrate paleontologist. You can also be, each of these main subdisciplines have lots of little splinter things inside of it. So one invertebrate is bugs. You guys know what bugs are, right? And the study of bugs is called entomology. So the study of fossil bugs is paleoentomology. And there's all sorts of cool bugs in the fossil record, like this Meganura. It's a dragonfly. I don't know how common they are in Sri Lanka. They're very common where I grew up. But the difference is that this dragonfly got up to 2 feet long, like its wingspan. So from here to here was massive. So this was a big giant bug. Just a little tidbit. So this is me right here 5 years ago when I started in paleontology, and I was actually looking for invertebrate fossils myself. And I'm right there looking at a seashell. Now, the next one, the one you guys have probably all heard about, are vertebrate paleontologists. These are things who study animals with a backbone. So say hi to Ibrahimul Bari. He's a friend of mine. He studies mammals specifically, so animals with hair and that feed their young with milk. And he studies those types of animals from the Indian subcontinent, which includes India and Bangladesh and Pakistan and Nepal and Sri Lanka and the Maldives. And I forget if I said Nepal and Bhutan. He studies mammals from that area of the world, which are around 2 million to 10,000 years old, or is the time period he studies. This is also known as the Ice Age or the Pleistocene. And this includes some very cool animals, including the largest elephant of all time. This is very important because we can tell how animals or vertebrates today came into being. We can also use them as index fossils, and we can tell a lot of the paleoecology. And we can kind of build a picture of what the world looked like. And it's very important in India, because specifically in the Indian subcontinent, because for some reason, a lot of these giant creatures, we call them megafauna, giant mammals, they survived longer or didn't die out at all when humans came along. So that might tell us that maybe humans weren't the things that were killing them. Maybe it was climate change, or maybe the humans came more slowly to the Indian subcontinent because the Himalayas on one side and the Ganges River Delta on one side and the Indus River on the other side kind of make it a little bit isolated, right? So maybe that protected them for a little bit from humans. And so humans came slowly. We're not sure. And this is one of the questions he's trying to figure out. And just to show you some cool things from the Indian subcontinent alive, these giant things called chelicotheres, they're massive. And they don't really look like anything that's alive today. We also had 6-toothed hippos, very scary looking hippos that used to live in India. Today, still in some places in India, we have lions, and they also lived in Sri Lanka. Most of these things lived in Sri Lanka. We also still have tigers, of course, you guys probably know. They had baboons, like Galeta baboons. As you can see, this one giving you a lovely smile. And here it is, the largest elephant of all time, probably the largest mammal of all time, Paleoloxodon pneumaticus, an incredible beast indeed. And there were many other types of elephants that lived in the Indian subcontinent. And as you know, some still live there today. And of course, this includes people who study dinosaurs as well, dinosaur paleontologists. And this is a baby T-Rex, or a juvenile T-Rex, I should say. So dinosaurs are a very cool thing that paleontologists study. They're not the only thing that paleontologists study, but they are very cool. Some special cases here. We have this silly looking person, that's me, and I study paleoanthropology. Now that's the study of humans, of fossil humans, their ancestors, as well as other fossil primates. Primates include things like monkeys and lemurs and apes, and I study those things. And this is a Sri Lankan zoo archaeologist named Kalangi Rodrigo, and she studies animals that are the bones of animals that are associated with human habitation. So all these, though these are a little younger than most of our fossils, she can use these bones in order to tell us what our ancestors were eating, what their pets were like, what animals lived alongside them, like in their environment, and all sorts of cool stuff. And of course, paleoanthropology teaches us how humans came to be human and how all the primates came to be primates, and why we survived when many others didn't. So it's very cool. And here we have paleobotany. Paleobotany is the study of plants. Botany is the study of regular plants. Paleobotany is the study of fossil plants. So say hi to Chase. Chase Egley is a close friend of mine, and he studies plants from the time of the dinosaurs. So what were some of these dinosaurs eating? So obviously T-Rex and stuff, they were big meat eaters, but there was a lot of dinosaurs who were herbivores who ate plants. And there were a lot of really cool things happening during this time, including the first plants with flowers on them evolved during this time. So he studies these things to learn more about the environment and to tell us what the world looked like at this time period. So these are some of the plant fossils he finds. You can see they still have the little veins in them like leaves do today, right? And this is a picture, a piece of art of what the world looked like at this time. This is actually what the South Pole would have looked like at that time. So it's the world has definitely changed a lot since the time of the dinosaurs. Next, we're going to move on to micropaleontologists. Now, micropaleontologists, they're kind of like jacks of all trades. So they can study tiny things from vertebrates. So they can study very tiny vertebrates. So you take out a screen and you sieve the dirt and the screen has these very tiny little holes in it. And so all the dirt goes away, but these tiny, tiny, tiny little bones and teeth stay there, and scales, and you can look at them under a microscope. They also look, some micropaleontologists study invertebrates, like plankton, for example, most of the time. And also other ones study pollen. We call these paleontologists. They study the pollen. And so this is Mrs. Lucy Edwards, say hi to her. And Dr. Lucy Edwards here studies dinoflagellates, which are a type of plankton. So they're a different type of dino, not a dinosaur. They're very tiny microscopic things. And this helped to prove that a meteor struck my home state 35 million years ago, making the largest crater in the United States. So these are very important because they give us a lot of data points, and there's usually a lot more microfossils than there are regular sized fossils. So you can tell a lot about the environment and build a really cool story from these things. You can also tell like what temperature it was, or where certain forest types were, or when people started planting plants, agriculture like rice and wheat. So these are examples of some dinoflagellates. You can tell they all have all different types of shapes, and she has a reference library where she looks through and matches what she sees in the books to what she is finding in the fossils, and what that means about the environment. And this is the crater she found, and there's actually another one in New Jersey, which is probably because the meteor broke in two. And this is how big the destruction was. This is where rocks that they're called tektites. So when like a meteor hits the ground, it shoots a bunch of the ground that it hits out, and it heats it up so hot it becomes glass. So these are where those little beads of glass are found. So you can tell it would have been a crazy massive impact. Not quite as big as the one that killed the dinosaurs, but a really cool one. Micropaleontologists are very important for finding oil and other fossil fuels, which keep the lights on in many places. And one of the important ways they help doing this are by using conodonts. Now, these are extinct, but these scary looking things have these things that look like teeth. They're actually not related to teeth, but they function in the same way. And this is what they look like. And they're microscopic. They're very tiny. And so these animals are obviously very tiny. And they can help us tell exactly how old and exactly what type of environment, marine environment that we had very, very long time ago, from like 250 million years ago all the way back to like 500 million years ago. So they're very special. So next we're going to go on to ichnologists. Now, say hi to Dr. Ranjiv Vipa. He is Sri Lankan. You can see he's wearing a Sri Lankan t-shirt. And this is a picture of that really tiny little seashell he has in his hand. And if you can see, it's got a big hole in it. That hole was left by a predator, something that was eating what was inside of this seashell, probably like a snail or something like that. He also studies parasites, or the paths the parasites leave on these shells. So he's looking at different things that were living inside these shells that we don't find the fossils of, like their bodies or you know, that, but we find the evidence of what they did. So he can build a better picture of the marine ecosystem and maybe learn things about how these parasites and predators are impacting our ecosystems today. And this is called ichnology, the study of trace fossils. So that's evidence of the past life, which isn't remains. It isn't skin, it isn't bone, it isn't muscle. It's what that thing did. So this includes burrows, is the most common. Sometimes a burrow will get filled in with dirt and you can tell it looks different than the surrounding rock. Footprints and handprints count, and tail drags and all sorts of things. Fossilized poop, feces. I know that's kind of funny, but that is actually extremely important for telling us what things ate. And holes left by parasites like this. This is another friend of mine, Dr. Van Vrenken, or Professor Van Vrenken. And here he is with, there's some burrows here. And I know you can't see him very well, but he's using a power tool to cut these out, which is really cool, I thought. And this is a fossil I found here with a lot. I couldn't bring this home, obviously. This is massive. This is big, a few hundred pounds. But you can see all of these burrows here. And we know what made these burrows because one of these we found had a shrimp at the end of it. So we think shrimp made these burrows. And this also applies to dinosaurs. Here's a track from my home state of Maryland, or a giant thing with lots of dinosaur footprints. And what was really special about this was not so much the dinosaur footprints, because we actually have a lot of dinosaur footprints. And also, first of all, the pterosaur footprints are cool. You probably heard them as pterodactyl. Pterosaurs are a flying reptile. But what was really, really cool were the mammal tracks. This is when mammals were just getting their start. They were tiny little things that lived in the shadow of the dinosaurs, but there were lots of different types of mammal tracks, which tells us that even though they were living in the shadow of dinosaurs, there were lots of different types of mammals. So that's all I have for you today for the subdisciplines. So just to show you that there's more to paleontology than just dinosaurs or just mammoths. And I hope you really enjoyed, and I hope you found something that you found interesting and cool and that maybe you want to learn more about. So without further ado, please. All right, turn my face back on. There we are. All right, so that was the subdisciplines. Please listen to your teacher and have a there we are. All right, so now we can go on to the next one. All right, so now it's your turn to be a deep time. So who here is ready for a fun activity? I think you guys are ready for a fun activity. So you have found a new fossil site. Great job. So, you know, now I'm doing these slides out of order because they wanted me to come in and teach you some stuff. So I'm starting with this, but in a bit, you guys will learn probably from Mr. Sabir how to tell how old a site is. But let's say you figured out that the site is around 10 million years old. So that's from the Miocene epoch, same time period as a lot of other cool things. And these are the fossils you find at the site. This, 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 and this, right? So let's go through each fossil and figure out what it can tell us. So this is what being a paleontologist is like. So if you guys can type it in the chat, if you can, What type of fossil do you think this is?
Can I tell?
Yeah.
It is a shark tooth.
It is a shark
It's a
tooth. You're exactly
megalodon
right.
tooth.
So
Yes, you're exactly right.
it must
Yeah.
be it's a megalodon tooth because the megalodon is the biggest. And
You're exactly
as
right.
it is big
It's
as
a
the hand.
megalodon tooth.
Yeah, all right. So we know that it's a megalodon tooth, right? Great job, guys. So next, this is a megalodon tooth. So what do we know? If there's a megalodon tooth here, what type of environment do you think it is?
What environment?
Yeah,
What environment?
you guys are exactly right. This is a marine ecosystem. This is a water environment, right? Yeah, you guys are exactly right. Now, there's another thing this tells us. What do megalodon need a lot of in order to live?
Meat?
Meat?
Yeah.
Eat.
Yeah, meat. They need a lot of meat. They need a lot of food, right? Because they're apex predators. They're massive 50-foot long shark, right? So they're as big as like 2 school buses. They need a lot of food, right? So that must mean there's enough food. Yeah, it's a carnivore, right? That's why it's got these big teeth that are kind of shaped like knives, right? So they need a lot of food. You guys are exactly right. Great job. So let's move on to the second fossil. Now, this thing is about as big as your head. What is this? Does anyone have any guesses? It's okay to be wrong.
It's a human. No.
Like, is this a tooth?
It must be bigger than.
It's not quite
Is
a
it
tooth, right?
The
elephant
megalodon
tooth?
is the biggest.
Yeah, it's very big. This is big. Yeah, it's as big as your head. About that big. So it's a bone. It's a bone, but it's as big as my head. What type of animal that lives in the ocean could have such a massive bone? Now, remember, sharks don't have bones. Sharks have cartilage bones, so they don't preserve as bones. Can you think of something that's a big?
Mosasaurus.
So it's not a dinosaur. This is actually after the dinosaurs, but that's a great guess. Or mosasaurs or any other thing like that. It's actually something that's still alive today.
Can be a bone of a mammal.
It's
A mammal. It is a type of mammal.
It's a
It's a
blue
sea
whale.
mammal. Blue
It's a
whale. Yeah,
blue
it's a
whale.
whale. You're exactly right. It's a whale. It's a whale bone, right? Yeah. So it's from a whale. But wait a minute. What are these things?
Yeah, scars.
Yeah, they're scars. Yeah, they're scars. They're grooves, right? So
Predator bites.
you're exactly right. See, yeah, see how you guys kind of like work through it together, right? This is great. These must mean that the shark is eating the whale, right? There's these giant bite marks in it. So this is ecology, right? This is how the animals are interacting with each other. So now we know 2 things. Let's move on to the next fossil. So these are called forams or foraminifera, and they're microscopic fossils. And since I did these slides out of order, or these presentations out of order, you guys don't know what isotopes are yet, but you will learn. So you can do things with isotopes that can tell you, for example, of oxygen, which tells you the temperature of the water. And after you read a scientific paper and learn that you can do this, you can do that test, and you can find out that from these forums, the water was very warm. It's very warm water, right? And then you have no tooth what this clue comes from, what this tooth comes from. I don't know what this tooth comes from, right?
Kind of a
Is that there?
Is it a kind of a mammoth? I mean,
So not
mammoth.
quite.
kind of a dinosaur.
Sacred tooth.
Well, see,
Mammoth.
you guys have all got these guesses, right? But wait, how are we going to test this? How do we figure out what a tooth is from, right?
A sacred tooth cat.
So are we just gonna like how are we gonna figure out what this tooth is from? What are we gonna do?
Collect its DNA.
Collect its DNA? That's a great guess. The problem with that is that
I
DNA is
was
very
also
fragile.
Actually, I was going to tell that.
Sorry, my internet cut out a little there, so I didn't quite hear you.
That in the DNA.
Yeah.
I
So
also thought the DNA.
yeah. So what we're gonna actually do?
Because otherwise, then we can find.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it keeps cutting out, so I can't quite hear it. So what we're going to do is we're going to compare them, right? We're going to use something called comparative collections.
It must be a tooth of a Tyrannosaurus.
A Tyrannosaurus, that's a great guess. Unfortunately, those are a little thinner, unfortunately. But what we could do is we could compare it to a Tyrannosaurus, right? We could find pictures or drawings or even like real things, and we could look at both of them and see if they look the same.
Is it
Yeah,
from
so-
a secret tooth cat?
Well, can you guys tell me what tooth? This is our tooth. Which one of these does it look most like?
It's a sea
It
tooth.
looks like seal tooth.
Yeah.
It looks like seal tooth.
Metal
Yes,
teeth.
it does look like seal tooth.
Looks like a dolphin
It's
tooth.
like a
Seal
seal
tooth. No, it's like
Seal
a seal
tooth.
tooth.
You guys are all right. You guys all got it right. See, you guys are learning. You're becoming paleontologists here, right? It's a seal tooth. You guys are exactly right. So now we know this is a seal tooth because we compared it to what we already had in the museum, right? This is a seal tooth, not a dolphin tooth, not a manatee tooth. It's a seal. So what is it? If I find a seal, what does that mean?
It's
Yeah,
in the ocean.
Yeah, it's in the
Yes.
ocean.
It's a marine animal. Marine. No, not
So
marine.
I have a question for you guys. Does it, yeah, a beach, right? Does the seal live like close to the beach or does it live way out in the open ocean?
Way out
It lives close to the
way
beach.
out in the open.
It's-
So seals, right? Do seals have gills? Can they breathe water?
No.
No, they can't, right? So they probably, and they,
Near the beach.
yeah, so they have to be near the beach.
Near the
You guys are
beach.
exactly right. So they have to be close to the shore. It's probably shallow water, right? Right. Now let's say you find this seal tooth, but you also find a lot of crushed crab fossils. You find crabs, but they're all crushed. So you think, you have a guess, something called a hypothesis, right? You suspect the seals might be eating the crabs. How can I figure out if seals are eating the crabs?
Because
The DNA and see what that seal has been eating before it died.
Yeah, we do tests on the tooth, right? We could look for something called microwear, see if there's wear on it that's consistent with that. Or we could do isotopes, but there's another thing that we could do. Are seals still alive today?
It looks
Yes.
like a seal.
Yeah. Seals are still alive today. Are crabs still alive today?
yes.
So
Yeah,
we can just look at a seal
Sir,
and see if it actually does eat crabs.
Exactly. We could talk to a scientist who studies living seals, and we could see if they eat crabs. And let's say she tells you that seals with similar teeth to this eat crabs. And what if she shows you pictures of those crabs they've eaten, and they're crushed in the same way as the fossils found? That means that they're probably doing the same thing, right? Yeah. So this is called
I have
uniform.
theory.
You have a
I want
theory?
to tell-
Yeah. Give a theory.
Yes, theory, not a theory. I have answer. Because the crab lungs are soft. That means they are eaten.
Yeah. They probably they crush them to eat them, right?
Yes.
That tooth
Okay,
looks.
got that answer.
Yeah. So now because we've done that, because you guys have figured all this out, because you're great paleontologists, you've now figured out just from those 4 fossils that this place used to be underwater, that it was near the shore, that it was warm, that there are giant sharks that eat whales. And, and this is what the site looks like, by the way. This is actually a site that's very near my hometown. And it's also the same type of rocks that are found in the north of Sri Lanka. And this is what the environment would have looked like, right? Giant sharks, whales. You've painted a picture just with 4 fossils. Imagine if you had a ton of fossils, and imagine if you had a lot of time to figure all this stuff out, right? And you could do even more tests and figure it out. You could learn a lot about that environment, right?
Excuse my son.
Mm-hmm.
Sir, they say that there is a mysterious monster called Nessie, but it looks similar to a dinosaur that lives underwater.
Yeah. So it looks like a plesiosaur, right?
It looks like
Yes.
a plesiosaur.
Yeah,
It
so
looks like a plesiosaur. I was going to tell them.
Yeah,
I was
so
going to tell
unfortunately,
that it was like a
yeah. So yeah, the Nessie and other places and or things like that. So the sea monsters and stuff that people see, they're probably just floating logs, unfortunately. But they do look a lot like plesiosaurs, right? So it's kind of interesting. It's kind of a like a fun little tidbit, right? So yeah, they do that. It's probably not anything that's alive today. But plesiosaurs from the past are kind of like, it's kind of fun. It's kind of entertaining, right? To look into the past and find things that would be really cool to see if they're alive today. So yeah, that's definitely right. So, and something else, that we can do with paleontology, once we find out environments like this, we can start thinking about, what type of, what we can start asking after we start asking these, what questions, what is there? We can start looking at the bones and figuring things out about the animals. Right here, I have a human skull or a replica of a human skull. And something that's kind of cool about a human skull that we can figure out, because actually at the exact same time as these animals were swimming around, we had the first bipedal humans. So the first bipedal apes, things that walked on two legs. From the skull, we can tell that humans walked on two legs because this hole for their spine to come out of, it's at the bottom, not at the back. So that means the spine doesn't come out like this, like four-legged animals, it comes out from the bottom so we can stand up straight, right? So because of that, we can start saying, okay, did things become bipedal at this time? Turns out they did. And then we can combine them. We can say the environment looks like this. The animals are changing like this. And then we can start to ask why. Why were the animals changing like this, right? And then that can help us learn more about the present day. So it's actually very important. So why should society support paleontology? Because it seems like it's kind of like a waste of time and money, right? Doesn't make any food, doesn't help society function in any way. But it could actually be the key to saving our species. Throughout Earth's history, life has changed in pretty much every way possible. It's faced every challenge. It's faced all sorts of things, meteors, tsunamis, earthquakes, climate change. Everything that's happening now has happened in the past. So so we can look at how life has dealt with these challenges in the past so that we can figure out how to prepare for them. We can figure out how to fix these problems, right? So for example, the climate right now is changing. So if we figure out how this impacted living things in the past when the climate changed many millions of years ago, we might be able to save millions of lives by seeing how we can anticipate or we can figure out what these problems this is going to cause and how we can deal with them. And it's very important because fossils are also, just beyond their utility, they're part of the heritage of our planet and our shared history. We got to protect them because, they're beautiful and they tell stories that are very important for future generations. They're very important for the people who live where they're found. So these, fossils in Sri Lanka, they're very important to you guys as your heritage, right? They're part of the place that you grew up, the place that you know and love. And so they're very important to the story of the place. And every other place also has fossils that are very important to that place as well. So they need to be preserved and taken to the future generations so that they can learn about them and see them and enjoy them and feel proud of them, right? So that is all I have for you guys today. So I'm going to stop sharing. And then we're going to have another question section for about 15 minutes or so, or until you guys are ready to go. So, and then we have a question in the chat, so I'm going to get to that first. Sir, they say, so Ranjan asks, sir, they say that if we collect enough DNA of a woolly mammoth, we can bring it back to life. Is that true? So yes, there are people that are trying to do this, right? We have found DNA of mammoths that are preserved in that permafrost. Remember I talked about that? They've frozen mammoths, frozen mummy mammoths. So can we bring back the mammoths from that? So DNA is very cool. We can clone animals. That means we can take cells from one animal and turn it into, take an egg and put the DNA into it, put it back into another animal. And then the animal that's born will be exactly the same as the animal that we took it from. So we've cloned it. We've made an exact copy of that organism. Unfortunately, we can't do that with something that is dead. We can't take a cell. The cells have to be alive for us to clone it. So although we can find the DNA, and we might be able to edit the DNA of a modern elephant in a way that looks a little similar, we can't, there's so many thousands and millions of changes in that DNA that we won't be able to completely exactly recreate a mammoth. But what we can do is we can change a modern elephant so that it's like hairier or bigger, or in very specific ways that it looks more like a mammoth, although it'll still just be an elephant. It'll just be a genetically modified elephant, right? So that's about the closest thing we can get to bringing a mammoth back to life. So that's a great question. I hope that answers it. So I see someone's got their hand raised. If you want to ask your question.
Can we bring back like the can we bring back dead animals to life by cloning them like that, or maybe some animals that are close to extinction and then clone them and make more of the species?
Yeah, we actually can. So yeah, while we can't bring back animals that have been extinct for a long time very easily, probably at all, what we can do is we can bring back from the brink animals that are very close to extinction, because we still have live cells from them, right? So for example, there's a species of ferret, of small, long kind of rodent-y looking things. They're not really rodents, but they're a fun little animal that eats prairie dogs in America, and they were very close to going extinct. And so the problem is when the population gets really small, the problem is something called inbreeding happens, and that just means that because there's not enough diversity in the genetics, they have a lot of they get sick very easily when they're born, and that's not good, right? That could mean that the species could go extinct, right? So one of the ways we fix this is that we still had living cells from an individual, from an animal that hadn't reproduced, so it hadn't had babies, but it had lived about 50 years ago, right? Had lived 50 years ago, but we still had the living cells. So we were able to clone that animal, basically, create an exact copy of it, and it reintroduced all the diversity in its genome into it. So it basically made the species less likely to get sick from genetic diseases. And so it basically helped save this species by cloning an animal that had died 50 years ago. So that only worked because we had living cells, but that is one way that cloning animals can help save them from extinction. So yeah. So next, let's go for Nuvina.
Yes, Mr. Mason. So my question is that how do we recognize a fossil of a specific animal?
That is a great question. So like we did with that seal tooth, what we can do is we can compare that to the bones or the fossil that we find to a living representative, right? To bones we have found before and identified. So if I find a fossil bear, I can compare that to a living bear, right? It might be a different species, it might be different in some ways, but it'll be most similar to that, right? So that's how we're going to identify things. And sometimes we get something that is so different from anything alive or any other fossil relative that we found that we simply don't know what it is. And that's okay. That happens. Maybe someday in the future we'll be able to figure it out. But for now, they stay as something that we don't know. And that's just part of science. So that's a great question. Yeah. So how about Sudita? Sudita, would you like to ask your question? Yeah.
Actually, my name is Sudita.
Sudita,
Never
awesome.
mind.
Mhm.
Actually, what was the first? The last dinosaur to be alive.
So what's the last dinosaur to be alive? That's a great question. And the answer is, if you go outside and you listen very closely, you'll hear the dinosaurs still singing today, because birds are dinosaurs. So dinosaurs actually never went extinct. You still hear birds and dinosaurs. Now, you're probably like, Mason, that's a little bit cheating, right? Because birds don't look very much like a T-Rex, right? So the answer that you're probably looking for was the last dinosaur to be alive. The question is the answer is we don't exactly know which one survived very long after that asteroid hit. But we think, but the ones that were alive when the meteor hit were things like T-Rex and Triceratops, and a few other animals like that were alive right when the meteor hit. So they were probably some of the last ones to live.
Actually, then why can't scientists find the first living the first living dinosaur or the last living dinosaur?
That's a great question. So the reason that we can't find the first or last member of any species, it's not just dinosaurs, it's any species, is because it's, remember I said that it's kind of hard for something to become a fossil, right? It has to be buried really quickly and everything. So the chance that you're going to find a fossil of something, of any one species, is actually really, really, really low. Like that's like rolling the dice, right? It's a very low chance of finding that you've found the first or last member of a species. And there's no way to know if the thing you found is the first or the thing you found is the last. We can only say that this is the oldest one that we have currently found, or this is the latest one we have currently found. As for latest, it's hard to say because sometimes they get reworked. That means they get, so we find fossils today, right? So that means that back in the even millions of years ago, fossils from even older were wearing out and then being reburied again. So we find fossils that look much younger than they actually are. So sometimes we'll find dinosaur bones that appear to be really young, like after the extinction, but they're actually just moved, right? But for the oldest ones that we found, I'm not sure exactly what it is because it actually changes every year because we find new ones, right? But one of the older ones is called Eoraptor. Eoraptor, it was a two-legged thing. It's not actually a raptor. It's not a dromaeosaur like Velociraptor, but it's a two-legged thing.
It's two legs, right?
Yeah, it had two legs.
Bird, I think. It has feathers.
Yeah, like a bird. Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah. I saw another question. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's something called Udoraptor. That starts with U.
There might be. I honestly don't know. If you've heard of it, then probably it does exist. Yeah, I'm not actually a dinosaur paleontologist, so I don't actually know. Yeah. So you probably got me beat there.
What is the first fossil to be found?
First fossil to be found. So as I said earlier, humans have been finding fossils even before they were modern humans, right? Neanderthals found fossils, Homo erectus found fossils. So the first fossil would be so people have found fossils for thousands and thousands of years. So we don't know. It could have been a lot of things. Some of the first fossils that were recognized as fossils, whenever I was talking about the ancient Greeks, so they found like marine fossils that they recognized. Seashells haven't changed a lot. And generally speaking, in the past few million years. So when you find a fossil seashell, you look at it and you go, that's a seashell, right? It's easy to figure that out. So those were some of the ones that were easy to figure out as fossils. But fossils have been found for many, many, many thousands, if not millions of years. Yeah. And I have a question. Oh, anytime. Thank you for the wonderful questions. And we have another question in chat. They say that there are only 2 rinsers in the world we can clone. Those rinsers to make more of its kind. Like dinosaurs? 2 times the dinosaurs in the world we can clone? Those Dinosaurs. So we actually can't clone dinosaurs. In fact, we've never actually been able to clone a bird.
It's rhinosaurs.
Rhinosaurs. I'm not sure what a rhinosaur is. Oh, rhinoceros. Okay. There's been some attempts at cloning rhinoceros. And I think they've been successful if memory serves. But yeah, it's very important. It's one of those when I was talking about conservation and like saving animals from extinction. We have, yeah, we are trying with those 2 rhinoceroses that are left. We are trying to clone them. Yeah, the problem is, again, we need living cells. And unfortunately, people didn't really collect living cells from some of the earlier ones. So we're kind of in a bad situation there. So we might not be able to do it, but we're trying. And that's why it's actually very important for biologists and things to collect living samples and freeze them of all types of animals. So if they get close to extinction, someday we'll be able to save them. So yeah, but yeah, you're exactly right. Rhinoceroses. Yeah. Awesome
Sir,
question.
I have heard that there is a mammoth that has been hermaphrodited in the Tarandra.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there have actually been many mammoths that have been mummified in the tundra. I think at last count, we're at about 9. I think we're about at 9. 9 full baby mammoths. We found pieces of many more. Yeah. And unfortunately, though they're frozen, they don't have living cells left in them. So it's been too long for that to happen. We have found some seeds that have living cells in them from that time period. We've been able to grow plants that have actually been buried for tens of thousands of years. It's very cool.
Excuse me, sir.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The first dinosaur?
So what's the first dinosaur?
Yes.
So one of the first ones that we have found evidence of, and I'll get you a picture of it, is Eoraptor. It's not the oldest because the oldest actually changes every year, because we keep finding new ones, but it's one of the oldest.
Is
And
it Eoraptor or Eoraptor?
Eoraptor. I'll put it in the chat so you guys can see how it's spelled. It's a Eo. Eo means true, or actually it means dawn. It means dawn, so like beginning, right? Like the dawn is the beginning of the day. And raptor means thief, so it means first thief because it has 2 little legs, so it seems like it could be a mischievous little animal, right? Eoraptor. Yeah. Pretty cool. Any other questions?
Mr. Mason?
Sir, actually, is there a first organism like called Archer or Squiglia,
Archaea?
like that?
Yeah. So there are some very early organisms with those names. Yeah, Archaea and Sprigina. Yeah, those are both very ancient organisms which we find. Hopefully, if you guys stay with the course and everything, we do have, I think, one that's on the history of life. So you guys will see a lot of those first early organisms and kind of see what they looked like, right? And there are definitely, yeah, you're exactly right. Archaea, Sprigina. Those are things, and archaea are actually still alive. They're kind of like weird bacteria that are kind of like in between being bacteria and more complex things like us. Yeah.
Mr. Mason?
Sir,
So if you don't mind, could you share your experience on the Mammoth site that you are working on as an intern?
Yeah.
South
So.
Dakota?
Yeah, so I worked over the summer at this place called the Mammoth Site, and you can see behind me some of the mammoths. This is a mammoth named Beauty. So basically what we have here are 61 mammoths that fell in a sinkhole. And it's been preserved in place. So we dig out the mammoths, but then we leave them there so that people can see them. And sometimes we take them out for scientific study. But what I did there, I was an education intern. So basically I went there, I stayed there for 3 months. They had a little place I could stay with the other interns. And I taught classes for kids like you guys. Basically, I took them into giant sandboxes that were filled with replica mammoth bones. So we took these mammoth bones and we made exact copies. We buried them in the giant sandboxes. We took tools that the paleontologists used and we gave them to all the kids like you guys. And we kind of taught them how to use them so they could figure out and have fun kind of unburying the bones. We also did some other classes, something called atlatl throwing. An atlatl is a type of ancient weapon that the Native Americans, the first people in my area of North America, used to actually hunt mammoths. It's basically a stick with a hook at the end, and you put an arrow on it, a long arrow or a spear, and it allows you to throw it very, very hard and very fast. So I could teach kids and adults how to use those. We threw them at targets, like the fake targets. Yeah, and we'll get photos of that to you guys. So we would teach them how to use those, and that was very fun. And also I'd go around with fossils, like the fossils I've been kind of showing you guys, like the mammoth tooth and everything. And we give them, we let people hold them and touch them so they can see them. I wish I was with you guys right now so I could give you this so you could hold it. Because it's a little funner, so you can connect it in your mind a little better. But yeah, I was just teaching classes and stuff because I was an education intern. The research interns were in the dig pit digging, finding these guys, looking for microfossils, cleaning them up. So yeah, I had a blast there. I went and looked around the entire area and learned things. So if you guys are ever, you get to an age where you want to become a paleontologist and you want to do things like that, I would certainly recommend looking for internships like that and applying to them. This is how you become a paleontologist, is you have to find these opportunities and kind of go for them and get these experiences. So I was trying to become a better educator so I could teach you guys, a little better so you guys could learn a little more.
Excuse me, Mr. Mason. What is the most country that has found fossils?
Can we have 1% at a time? Let's see. I think, can we have Ranjan first?
Excuse me, sir. What is the most country that has fossils?
That's a great question. And actually, countries, most countries have fossils. And it's kind of hard to say which one has the most. I can say that America has, the United States has a ton of fossils just because it's very big. But one of the countries that it's kind of small, but it still has a ton of fossils is Morocco. Morocco is a country in Africa. It's in Western Africa, where it has fossils from a ton of time periods, and it's got many, many millions of them from lots of different time periods. It's very cool. But there's lots of other places, and a lot of places which haven't been explored for fossils very much. India is a prime example of that, of a place that has a lot of fossils probably, but not a lot of people looking for them. So they're kind of, who knows what's going to be found there. China has a lot of fossils. Where I look for fossils for my research, or where I will be looking for fossils, is some place called Kenya, right? Kenya is in Eastern Africa. Places in Europe have lots of fossils. So it turns out fossils are actually found all over the world. But I would say if I had to put a place that's like the best place to look for fossils, I'd say probably Morocco. Yeah. I hope that answers that question.
Sir.
And Sudita?
Actually, how does Notila look like?
How does what look like?
Notila? I can't pronounce that.
Oh, no, you're okay. Mochila.
Mochila. N. It starts with N.
And Nutria?
Yes, I think like that.
Yeah, Nutria. Nutria is a type of rodent. Which is it's a big rodent. It's a big rodent. It's very invasive, which means that it gets into places it's not supposed to be.
Not a rodent. Actually, I'm talking about I think it's like single-celled organism. Notila?
Single-celled organism. Oh, then I wouldn't. Then I don't know exactly. Because I don't study those little tiny microorganisms. That's a great question. If it's a microorganism, it probably looks, depending on whether it's single-celled or multi-celled, it probably just looks. You have to look at it under a microscope. And it would look something like that, like a circle, and then it has something called, it has some DNA inside. If it's a multi-celled organism, it might have something called a nucleus in it, which is a tinier little thing inside of it, which has all of its DNA.
Yeah. Then how long is Songia?
How long is it?
How many nanometers is it?
Ooh, I don't know how many nanometers it is. Yeah, that's a great question. You could probably find that online. But yeah, I don't know how long it is in nanometers. Probably a good amount of nanometers. Nanometers are pretty small. But yeah, I'm not sure. It's a great question.
I was going to take picometers. That is smaller than nanometers.
Oh, it's smaller than nanometers? Wow, that's crazy.
Picometers.
Picometers. Wow, that's very cool. Yeah. Any other questions? Anyone else?
Excuse me, sir.
Mm-hmm.
In some island in United States, there is some crater, and one person went in there, and it was not buried, but he could find lots of bones and skulls of one woolly mammoth.
Yeah. So islands, yeah. So there's lots of islands. There's one off the United States where they have very tiny mammoths called pygmy mammoths, right? They basically when things get caught on islands, they usually get either really small or really big. So mammoths, because they were already really big, they got really small, right? So yeah, there's a place called the Channel Islands where they found them in the US. You're exactly right. There's another place off Russia where they found mammoths that were actually the youngest mammoths in the world. They lived all the way up to 5,000 years ago, which I know sounds like a long time, but 5,000 years ago, that's when Egyptians were building those pyramids. So those Egyptians were alive at the same time that mammoths were, which is kind of crazy to think about. Yeah, so you're exactly right.
So the species of they used to live a lot of years ago. Where did they live as their habitat?
Where do they live as their habitat? That's a great question. So they would live in shallow, warm places, because shallow, warm places, that means that there's a lot of food to eat, right? So Opabina was probably a carnivore, probably ate other animals. So it was eating, like trilobites and smaller things like that. So, or maybe soft-bodied things like worms, because they don't actually have jaws. They have a thing called a mouth cone. It's like a circle, and they use their proboscis and they break things on it and then kind of suck it up. So yeah, they would be living in places with a lot of life in it, a lot of living things in order for it to eat it. Things that are kind of like coral reefs today, except there's no coral back then. So it would just been a place that was just kind of bursting with life. That's where they live, which is usually shallow places and warm places. So that's a great question.
Thank you for that, students. Thank you very much, Mr. Mason, for answering those questions. So before we wind up the session, I would like to, congratulate your granddad, as I believe, for receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'll pass that on to him. He's very honored by it and very appreciative of it. So thank you very much.
That was really nice. So thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Mason. So I think I enjoyed really well. I believe all the students here do enjoy the lesson. So thank you for your time. And thank you, students, for joining today's session. Let's meet again next Sunday.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye, guys.
Have a nice day, Mr. Mason.
You too.
Bye,
Bye.
Mr. Mason.
Sir. Nice day, sir. Bye, sir.
Bye, guys. Bye. You guys are awesome. Bye.
Bye, sir.
Bye.